The snow came down hard that day, thick and heavy like it had a purpose. The wind howled across the plains of Montana, bending trees and swirling frost in every direction. A young woman stood alone beside a broken-down wagon, her hands raw from the cold, her lips trembling not just from the cold but from everything she had lost. Her name was Evelyn. She had no coat, only a worn dress and a thin shawl that did little to fight off the bitter cold. Her boots were soaked through. One of them had a hole in the sole. She'd been standing there for hours, maybe longer. She no longer felt her fingers. The snow covered the road, erasing her path and any chance of being found. The wagon wheel lay twisted, snapped clean through. There was no horse. It had panicked and run off during the storm. Evelyn had tied her last hope to that animal. Now she was truly stranded. She gripped a small envelope in her hand, its edges curled from dampness. The letter inside was short. 5 words. I won't be coming. Goodbye. The man who had promised to marry her had left her without a second thought. No explanation. No warning. She didn't cry anymore. There were no tears left in her body, not with a cold this deep. Just then, through the thick wall of white, she saw a shape. A large horse moved slowly through the snow, steam rising from its nostrils. On its back sat a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in furs and buckskin. His long black hair was braided and fell over one shoulder. A red scarf was tied around his neck. His dark eyes were sharp, watchful, quiet. He looked like he had come from another time, from another world. Evelyn didn't move. She thought maybe the cold had made her see things. But he kept coming. The man stopped a few feet away and stared down at her. The silence between them was louder than the wind. She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She forced the words out anyway. "Please take me away," she whispered. "I have no one." For a long time, the man said nothing. Snow clung to his shoulders and horse. His face stayed calm, unreadable. Finally, he climbed down from his horse with ease and walked toward her. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. Just stepped through the snow like he belonged in it. She didn't step back. She couldn't. He looked her over, then reached out and gently touched her arm, testing how cold she was. "You'll die out here," he said quietly, more to himself than her. He looked her in the eyes, holding her gaze. His voice was deep but steady. "Will you marry me?" Evelyn blinked. Maybe she didn't hear him right. Maybe the cold was playing tricks. But his expression didn't change. She started, then stopped. She had nothing to offer. No family, no dowry, no future. Just her name, just her broken spirit. And yet, for the first time in days, she felt something other than fear. She nodded, not because she understood what was happening, but because she had no better answer. She didn't want to die in the snow. And something about him, the calm, the strength, told her she wouldn't. He picked her up carefully, like she was made of glass. She didn't protest. She didn't even shiver anymore. He lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her and wrapped a heavy fur blanket around them both. The horse turned, and they rode into the storm. She didn't ask where they were going. She just closed her eyes and leaned back against him. The storm followed them for miles. Snow pelted the horse's back, forming soft ridges that melted slowly under the warmth of Evelyn's breath. Her fingers remained curled inside the fur blanket, stiff and aching, but safe. She didn't know how long they'd been riding. Her eyes fluttered open now and then, catching glimpses of dark trees, tall and leaning in as if to shield them from the wind. The man behind her hadn't said a word since lifting her onto his horse, but he held her tightly, not too tightly, just enough to let her know she wasn't alone. Eventually, the trees grew thicker. Pines coated with snow lined a narrow trail. The branches hung low, brushing Evelyn's shoulders as they passed. The wind softened. The cold remained, but it was no longer biting, only heavy and still. She looked up once to see smoke curling above the treetops. It was the first sign of life she'd seen in hours. The horse stopped in front of a small log cabin tucked into the woods. The roof sagged under the weight of snow. A single lantern glowed through the frosted window. The man climbed down first and reached for her carefully, guiding her to the ground. Her legs buckled, weak from the cold and fear and everything else, but he caught her before she fell. Inside, he said softly. Evelyn stepped into the cabin, and the warmth hit her like a wave. The fire crackled in the hearth, and a pot of something warm steamed over it. Furs covered the floor. Wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with dried herbs, tools, and worn books. It was small, but it was safe. She'd never seen anything more welcoming. He shut the door behind them and removed his coat and scarf, shaking off snow. Evelyn watched him from the middle of the room, still wrapped in the thick fur. Her lips parted, unsure what to say. She had no name for him, no clue where she was. "My name's Cale," he said, as if sensing her thoughts. She blinked. "Evelyn." Cale nodded once, then moved to the fire and stirred the pot. "You're lucky I found you. Most don't last more than a night in a storm like that." She nodded slowly, sitting on the edge of a wooden bench near the hearth. "I don't think I would have." Cale handed her a bowl filled with thick stew, rabbit, maybe, and vegetables. It smelled better than anything she'd eaten in days. "Eat," he said. "You'll feel better." They ate in silence for a while. Evelyn's hands trembled, but the food steadied her. Warmth returned to her cheeks. Her toes tingled painfully as feeling crept back into them. Every now and then, she glanced at Cale. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't waste words. His eyes stayed alert, as if always listening. Finally, she broke the silence. "Did you mean it?" Cale looked up from his bowl. "Mean what?" "What you said about marrying me." He paused, setting the bowl down. "Yes." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached behind the firewood stack and pulled out a bundle of dried herbs, hanging them on a hook to dry. Then he turned to face her. "My people believe in dreams," he said. "Sometimes they show us what's coming. Last winter, I dreamed of a woman standing alone in the snow, crying, lost. She had a scar on her hand." He glanced down at hers. "Same as yours." Evelyn's eyes widened. She turned her palm up slowly, revealing a thin white line stretching across the base of her thumb. She'd gotten it as a child, trying to climb through her mother's broken window. "I've been waiting," he continued. "When I saw you, I knew." She didn't know what to say. The cabin was suddenly too quiet. The fire popped, sending a spark into the stone hearth. Outside, the snow kept falling. She looked at him, really looked. He was unlike anyone she'd ever met. Not just in appearance, but in presence. There was something solid about him, something ancient and unshaken. Evelyn had spent her life surrounded by people who lied, who took what they wanted and left. But Cale had carried her through a storm without knowing a thing about her, and asked for nothing in return. "Do you still want to?" she asked quietly. His gaze didn't waver. "Yes, even though you don't know me." He walked toward her, slow and careful. "I know enough. You survived. You didn't give up. That's what matters to me." Evelyn looked down at her lap. Her fingers twisted in the fur edge of the blanket. She had nothing left. No family. No past worth sharing. But maybe here in this place, she could have something new. She looked up. "Then yes, I'll marry you." Cale nodded once. There was no joy on his face, no excitement, just something calmer, deeper. A quiet promise. He walked to a carved wooden chest in the corner, pulled out a small leather pouch, and retrieved a simple copper ring. He didn't kneel, didn't ask again. He simply took her hand and slid it onto her finger. "You're safe now," he said. And for the first time in years, she believed it. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside the cabin, the fire burned strong. Evelyn sat close to it, wrapped in warmth and wonder. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was only beginning. Evelyn woke before the sun. The fire had burned low, casting soft orange light against the walls of the cabin. Cale sat near the window, sharpening a blade. He looked up when she stirred, offering a small nod, but no words. The world outside was quiet, wrapped in a thick white sheet of snow. It covered everything, The trees, the trail, the sky. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped moving. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Is it always this quiet up here? Kale paused, listening. The snow hushes everything, makes you hear yourself more than the world. Evelyn stared into the fire. I'm not sure I like hearing myself. Kale didn't press her. He simply stood and stirred the fire back to life, then went to prepare a simple breakfast, boiled eggs and flatbread. She ate in silence, her mind filled with images she hadn't invited. Her father's face, the bruises her mother never explained, the cold basement where she'd once hidden after a night gone wrong, then the loneliness that came after they were both gone, and the wandering from job to job, couch to couch, until nothing felt like home. Kale glanced at her from across the table. You don't have to tell me, he said, but if you carry something heavy, it's lighter shared. Evelyn hesitated. Then, slowly, the words came. I never had anyone stay. Everyone I've ever loved left or hurt me. Sometimes both. She expected him to ask for details. He didn't. I ran from the last place because a man I trusted, he wasn't who he claimed. I thought he cared for me, but he just wanted control. When I said no, he got angry. I left that night. I didn't even take a coat. Kale's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched slightly on the edge of the table. You're safe now, he said again, and the way he said it made her believe it more than before. After breakfast, Kale led her outside to see the land. The snow had stopped falling, leaving behind a glittering world of white. The trees sparkled like they wore crystal. Smoke still curled from the chimney. She followed him up a narrow path behind the cabin that led to a ridge overlooking the valley. From there, Evelyn saw what Kale had built. A trapline curved through the woods, marked with carved signs. A small greenhouse stood under a timber awning, warmed with reflected sunlight and lined with winter crops. A coop of chickens huddled together, feathers puffed against the cold. You live here alone? She asked. Kale nodded. Since my brother died 3 winters ago. I'm sorry. He didn't respond right away. Then he said, he was the only family I had left. We came here to escape the war. Both served, both saw things we didn't want to carry anymore. We thought we'd find peace in silence. He did for a while. And you? Kale looked at her. I found a reason to keep waiting. They stood quietly for a while. The cold bit at their skin, but the view made it worth it. Later that day, Kale gave Evelyn a worn coat and showed her how to feed the animals. She didn't know much about chickens or firewood, but he taught patiently. His hands were rough and sure, and she liked the way he explained things without judgment. In the afternoon, a gust of wind carried the sound of distant howling. Kale stopped mid-step. Wolves? He nodded. They don't come close often, but the storm might have pushed them near. We'll check the fences tomorrow. The idea of danger outside should have scared her, but it didn't. Somehow, with Kale beside her, even the unknown felt less threatening. That evening, she found a small leather journal in the corner shelf. Is this yours? Kale looked over from the fireplace. My brother's. He wrote down everything he planted, hunted, fixed. She opened it. Inside were detailed notes about the land, drawings of wild herbs, sketches of birds, and even some poems tucked in the margins. He sounds like he was kind. He was strong too. Always knew the right thing to say. I was the quiet one. Evelyn smiled. Then I guess I'm the quiet one now. Kale chuckled. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh. It was low and warm, like thunder in summer. She turned the page, pausing on a small sketch. It was of a woman standing in snow, her face half-shadowed. Is this me? Kale nodded. He saw her in a dream once. Said she was important. I didn't believe it then. Evelyn's fingers trembled slightly. So your brother dreamed of me too? Maybe not you exactly, but someone like you. A soul in need of healing. He always said we're drawn to the people who help us become who we're meant to be. They sat quietly after that. The fire glowed bright. The wind howled gently through the trees, but the cabin stayed warm. Outside, the snow had begun again, light and steady. Evelyn leaned back in the chair, rings still snug on her finger. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this was the first place she hadn't felt afraid in a very long time. Kale stood and looked at the snow falling outside the window. Storm's coming again. Evelyn looked up. Will it be bad? He didn't answer, but the way his eyes narrowed, the way his jaw clenched, it made her heart beat a little faster. Something was coming, and whatever it was, it might not leave them in peace. The fire crackled low on the hearth. A thin draft whispered through the cracks in the old wood walls, wrapping around Evelyn like a warning. She lay awake in the small cot Kale had prepared for her, staring at the beams overhead. Snow tapped lightly on the window. Outside, the storm still danced through the pines, but inside, all was still, too still. Kale was in the other room, silent as always. She could hear the occasional shift of his footsteps on the floorboards. It was comforting. He didn't talk much, but he was always there, always watching, always alert. She was just starting to drift asleep when it happened. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks at the door. Evelyn sat bolt upright, heart pounding in her chest. Kale's door opened instantly. He was already pulling on his coat, rifle in hand. His face was carved with tension. He moved silently to the door and pressed his back against the wall beside it. Who's there? His voice cut through the cabin like a blade. A beat of silence. Then, a raspy voice. I need help. Please. I'm cold. I got caught in the storm. Evelyn stepped back, unsure. Kale narrowed his eyes. Name? Another pause. Matthew, the voice said. I was hunting. I lost my horse. I saw your smoke. Kale's eyes flicked to Evelyn. He motioned her to stay back, then cracked the door open, just enough to see. Snow swirled in. The figure on the porch was hunched, wrapped in furs, face half frozen, beard thick with ice. Kale opened the door fully and caught the man as he stumbled forward. He helped him inside, but kept the rifle trained loosely at his side. Evelyn rushed to grab a blanket and a steaming tin of broth, her instincts taking over despite the tension. The man sank into the chair by the fire, groaning. God bless you both. I thought I was done for. Kale handed him a cup and said nothing, his eyes never leaving the stranger. Evelyn finally spoke. You said you lost your horse? Matthew nodded. Spooked by wolves, I think. I wandered for miles before I spotted the smoke from your chimney. Been out there 2 days. Kale stepped back. Where's your rifle? Matthew's eyes flickered. Lost it when the horse bolted. My pack too. Kale didn't respond. He simply sat in the corner and watched. His instincts were sharper than any man Evelyn had ever known. If Kale didn't trust him, neither would she. That night, the tension was thick. Evelyn lay awake again, unable to rest with a stranger under the same roof. She heard Kale pacing long after the fire dimmed. In the morning, Kale had already gone out to check the traps. Evelyn found Matthew still in the chair by the fire, sipping tea like he belonged there. You're not from here, he said casually. She looked at him sharply. No, just passing through. Matthew smiled slowly. With him. Evelyn shrugged. He's been kind to me. Matthew leaned forward. You're lucky. Not many people survive out here alone, especially women. She didn't reply. Something about the way he spoke made her skin crawl. Too smooth, too confident. Kale returned an hour later, covered in snow and silent as always. He walked past Matthew without a word, straight to Evelyn. Can I speak to you outside? He murmured. She followed him to the porch, shivering in the cold. I checked his bag last night, Kale said low. He's got a map, with our cabin marked on it. Evelyn's eyes widened. He was looking for you, or this place, or both, but he didn't stumble on us by chance. What do we do? Kale looked toward the trees. Wait for the storm to clear. Then he leaves. That evening, they all ate in silence. Matthew told stories of old frontier towns, bandits, trading posts, and wolves. Evelyn listened, but her eyes were on Kale. After dinner, she approached him while Matthew cleaned up by the fire. I don't feel safe, she whispered. Kale nodded. You're not wrong. The next day, the wind died. The sun broke through, and the world turned white and blinding under the fresh snow. Cale packed some food and supplies and set them on the table. "You'll be moving on today," he said to Matthew. Matthew didn't argue. "Of course. Thank you for the shelter." He put on his coat and smiled at Evelyn. "Maybe I'll see you again." Cale stepped between them. "I doubt it." They watched from the window as Matthew disappeared into the trees. Cale didn't speak until long after. "He'll be back," he said simply. "Why do you think he came here?" Evelyn asked. Cale was quiet for a long time before answering. "This valley used to belong to my people. There are stories, legends of something hidden here. Gold, sacred ground. Maybe he thinks he'll find it." "Will he?" Cale looked at her with steady eyes. "Not unless I let him." That night, Evelyn found herself curled on the bench beside the fire, Cale seated across from her. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was protective, intimate. "Thank you," she said softly. He looked over. "For what?" "For keeping me safe. For not turning me away." Cale leaned forward. His dark eyes held hers. "You're not alone anymore." The storm outside began again, gentle at first. Snow drifted softly past the window, blurring the trees in the distance. Evelyn rested her head against the back of the chair. Her body was tired, but her heart was still alert. Somewhere out there, danger still waited. But inside, in this little wooden cabin, something new had started to grow. Trust, warmth, and maybe something deeper. But just as she began to relax, a shadow passed across the window. Neither of them moved. Cale reached for his rifle, and Evelyn held her breath. The cabin had never felt so quiet. Even the fire crackled in a slower rhythm, as though it was listening. Evelyn sat near the hearth, watching the flames flicker, her fingers wrapped tightly around a warm cup. Cale was outside again, checking the traps and watching the woods. He had barely slept in 2 nights. Something about the silence outside unnerved her. Snow had started falling again, large flakes drifting down from the heavy clouds, blanketing the land in white. It looked peaceful, but Evelyn knew better now. Sometimes the most beautiful things were the most dangerous. Cale returned just before dusk. He stepped inside, shaking snow from his shoulders, his expression tight. "I found tracks again," he said without looking up. "Same boots. Circling farther this time." "Are you sure it's him?" Evelyn asked, her heart picking up. Cale looked her in the eyes. "I know it is. He's not gone. He's watching us." Evelyn felt a chill deeper than the cold. "But why? Why not just leave?" Cale set down his rifle and stood by the fire, staring into the flames. "I've tried to live quietly," he said after a long pause. "But the past doesn't let go easy." Evelyn frowned. "What are you saying?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Years ago, I worked as a scout. I helped protect small towns during the war, and after it ended, I took jobs tracking criminals. One of those men, I thought I killed him." Her eyes widened. "You think it was Matthew?" "I know it was," Cale replied. "He was part of a group that raided settlements. Hurt innocent people. They didn't care who got in the way. I was sent after them. I burned their camp to the ground. I watched it go up in flames, and I thought he was inside. But he survived. Yes. And now he's come for revenge. He didn't just stumble across you out there. He was hunting this place. Hunting me." The truth hit Evelyn like a cold wave. "You think he was using me?" "I don't know," Cale said. "But it's no accident he was on that trail. And now he's playing a slow game, circling, leaving signs, testing our fear." She looked at him, her voice shaking. "What do we do?" Cale's face hardened. "We fight back." That night, they barricaded the windows with wooden planks and moved the furniture against the doors. Cale checked every lock, every corner. Evelyn helped where she could, learning quickly how to load the small pistol he'd given her. They didn't sleep much. Every sound outside made them flinch. Then, just after midnight, Evelyn heard something, a whisper of movement, a crunch of snow underfoot. She crept to the window and peeked through the edge of the curtain. Her breath caught. There were footprints. Fresh. Just outside the window. Closer than ever before. "Cale," she whispered, backing away. He was already up, rifle in hand. He rushed to the door and opened it slowly, stepping outside into the cold. Evelyn followed, heart pounding. The snow was falling thicker now, swirling around them like smoke. The prince led from the woods to the cabin's wall, then vanished into the darkness. He was watching us, Evelyn whispered. Cale nodded grimly. He's trying to scare us. He wants us to panic. They went back inside, bolted the door, and sat by the fire again. Evelyn couldn't stop shaking. But it wasn't just fear, it was rage. She had spent her life afraid. First in her father's house, then in Matthew's shadow. No more. I won't be a prisoner again, she said suddenly. Cale turned toward her, eyebrows raised. I ran from him once, she continued, voice trembling but fierce. But I won't run again. Not this time. Cale's expression softened. You don't have to run. Not while I'm here. They shared a quiet look, something unspoken passing between them. Something that warmed her more than the fire. Later, as the snowstorm grew worse, Cale pulled out a worn map and showed Evelyn the traps he'd set around the property. She leaned closer, tracing the lines with her finger. You planned all this? She asked. I've lived alone a long time, Cale said. Learn to be careful. Evelyn looked at him. But you're not alone anymore. That made him pause. Then he said, no, I'm not. The next morning, they went outside together. The snow was deep now, reaching their knees. The wind had quieted, but the sky was still heavy. As they walked the perimeter, they found one of the traps had been triggered. A torn piece of fabric, red, hung from the jaws. Cale picked it up and scowled. It's his. Evelyn felt her breath hitch. But where is he? Still out there, Cale said. Still playing games. That night they waited. The storm outside howled like wolves. Inside, they sat close, silent, each lost in thought. I never told you what happened the night I ran, Evelyn said. Cale looked at her gently. You don't have to. I want to, she said. I need to. She told him about the locked rooms. About the way Matthew controlled every part of her life. How he made her feel small, weak, invisible. I waited for years, hoping he would change. But he never did. So I packed a bag one night and slipped out. I didn't care where I ended up, as long as it was far from him. Cale took her hand. You're not invisible anymore. Evelyn looked at him, eyes stinging with tears. You see me. I do. Just then, the wind stopped. A silence fell over the cabin, thick and unnatural. Cale stood, eyes narrowing. Something's wrong. They moved to the window. Outside in the falling snow stood a figure. Matthew. He stood at the tree line, staring at the cabin. No more hiding. Cale looked at Evelyn. It ends soon. Evelyn nodded, hand tightening around her pistol. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The storm had only grown worse overnight. By morning, it was impossible to tell where the sky ended and the earth began. The snow fell in thick sheets, covering every trail, every tree, every memory of warmth. It was the kind of cold that crawled into your bones and stayed there. Inside the cabin, Evelyn sat near the fire, hands wrapped around a steaming tin cup. Cale hadn't slept. He sat near the door, eyes sharp, rifle in hand, ears alert to every creak and gust of wind. Neither spoke much. Words felt unnecessary now. What hung between them was heavier than silence. It was the certainty of what was coming. I think it's today, Cale finally said, his voice low. Evelyn nodded. He's close. I can feel it. Cale stood and tightened the straps on his boots. He checked his rifle again and handed Evelyn extra rounds for her pistol. You know what to do if it comes to it. She looked at him. I'm not leaving you, Cale. His jaw tightened, but he gave her a single nod. Then we stand together. The thud came not 10 minutes later. A sharp, sudden crash against the side of the cabin. Then another. Snow slid off the roof with a heavy crack. Evelyn jumped to her feet, heart pounding. Then came the unmistakable sound, glass shattering. He's at the back window, she said. Cale moved fast, throwing open the cabin door just as another gust of wind slammed into the clearing. The cold hit them like a wall, but they pushed forward. Matthew stood near the edge of the woods. He was wrapped in a heavy coat, fur collar pulled high, rifle in hand. His face looked twisted, half shadowed by the falling snow, half twisted by rage and something worse, desperation. "I warned you," he called out, voice carrying across the wind. "You thought he could protect you, Evelyn. A ghost like him." Kel stepped forward, rifle raised. "Put the gun down. You're not walking away from this." Matthew laughed bitterly. "Neither are you." He fired. The shot rang through the air, echoing like thunder. Cale tackled Evelyn into the snow, just in time, the bullet flying inches above her head. They scrambled behind a thick tree trunk. "I have 2 rounds left," Cale muttered. "You?" "4," Evelyn whispered, her hands trembling but steady. She wasn't the same woman who'd walked into this wilderness weeks ago. She wasn't afraid anymore. Matthew was still coming, slowly, like a man with nothing left to lose. "You took everything from me," he shouted. "You were mine, Evelyn." "No," she shouted back. "I was never yours. You only thought you owned me. You think he's your future?" Matthew's voice cracked. "He's a savage, a broken man. He doesn't belong anywhere." Cale stood up from behind the tree. "I belong where I choose to stand. And today, I stand between you and her." He fired. The shot struck Matthew's leg. He staggered, cried out, but didn't fall. Blood bloomed in the snow. Still, he limped forward, rage keeping him upright. Evelyn fired next. Her bullet hit the tree beside him, close enough to make him flinch and stumble. He dropped to his knees, breathing heavy, snow collecting on his shoulders. Still, he tried to raise the gun again. Evelyn stepped out from behind the tree, pistol trained on him. "It's over, Matthew." His eyes met hers. "You'll never be free of me." She didn't move. "I already am." Cale approached from the side, weapons still raised. Matthew looked at them both, at the stillness in Cale's eyes, the strength in Evelyn's. The gun in his hand trembled. Then it dropped into the snow. He collapsed forward with a grunt, his breath clouding around him. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the wind shifting through the trees, as if the land itself was releasing a long-held breath. Evelyn exhaled, her shoulders falling. Cale walked to her side and pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. She just let herself be held. "It's done," he whispered. She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "It's finally over." The snow kept falling. It coated Matthew's still body, erasing the violence, the past, the pain, like the land itself was trying to bury it all. Cale and Evelyn stood over him, saying nothing. No prayers, no goodbye. He had made his choice. And now, so had they. They buried him near the ridge as the wind died down and the snow began to ease. There was no marker, just the shallow grave beneath the trees. A place for him to be forgotten. Evelyn stood there for a long time, staring at the white mound. "He's haunted me for so long. I didn't realize how heavy that was until it lifted." Cale took her hand. "You're free now, and we're still standing." She looked up at him. Together, he nodded. The sky began to open. A pale light peeked through the clouds, casting a glow on the snow-covered valley. It was still winter, but it didn't feel so cold anymore. The storm had passed. Snow lay gently across the land, like a soft white blanket tucking the world into peace. Smoke curled from the chimney, the only sign of life in the frozen quiet. Birds slowly returned to the trees, their songs cautious but hopeful. The cold wind no longer cut like a blade, it whispered now. Everything felt still. "Come." Evelyn stood on the porch, her breath rising in little clouds. Wrapped in a thick buffalo hide coat Cale had given her, she held a cup of steaming pine needle tea, the scent earthy and fresh. She had never tasted anything like it before she came here. Now, she couldn't imagine mornings without it. The valley below looked different. Not because the land had changed, but because she had. What had once felt threatening now looked sacred. What had felt isolating now felt like freedom. Behind her, Cale stepped outside. He moved like the mountain itself, solid, quiet, dependable. It's beautiful after a storm, Evelyn said softly. Cale nodded. Nature always teaches us. Pain doesn't stay forever. They stood side by side for a long moment, neither speaking. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of memories, loss, healing, and something new, something bright. I keep thinking about what's next, she said. Do you want to leave? He asked, his voice steady but soft. She turned to look at him, eyes wide. No, I want to stay. If that's okay. Cale didn't answer with words. He simply took her hand. His warmth surprised her. Even in the snow, he never seemed cold. I want you to stay too, he said finally, but not just as someone passing through. Evelyn's heart thumped once hard. What do you mean? I mean, if you choose this life, choose me with it. The words weren't fancy. They weren't wrapped in poetry, but they carried more weight than anything she had ever heard. Evelyn looked down at their hands, her pale skin against his sun-warmed brow. So different, yet somehow a perfect mismatch. I was broken when I came here, she said quietly. I thought I'd stay that way forever. Cale stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You weren't broken. You were healing. Tears welled in her eyes. She had spent years convincing herself she didn't deserve happiness, that she was only meant to survive, never thrive. But now, with him, this man who had shown her more kindness than anyone in her life, she finally believed something else. She was worthy of joy. I want to build something with you, she whispered. A life, a home. He smiled, slow and sure. Then let's begin today. They spent the afternoon gathering things. Cale spoke of a place near the stream where the trees were tall and the earth was soft for planting. He pointed out the direction where elk grazed in the spring and where berries grew wild in summer. Evelyn listened with wonder. Every word he said painted a future she had never dared imagine. As the sun dipped low, she sat across from him by the fire. The light flickered on his face, casting shadows and warmth in equal measure. I don't have a ring, he said suddenly, but I have this. From around his neck, he pulled a thin leather cord. Woven into it was a single turquoise bead and a small carved bear tooth. It belonged to my mother, he explained. She wore it when she married my father. It's sacred to me. Evelyn reached out, her fingers trembling. Are you sure? Cale nodded. I've carried it for years, waiting for someone worthy of it. That's you. Tears rolled down her cheeks as he gently tied the cord around her wrist. In my people's way, he said, this means you are my heart, my future, my home. She whispered through tears, then I give you my past, my present, and everything I will ever be. No words could follow. Only a kiss, slow, deep, and true. The kind of kiss that settles things, that speaks when lips can't find a right sound. That night, under the low ceiling of the old cabin, they wrapped themselves in blankets and each other. The snow continued falling outside, but inside, the world was warm. The weeks passed, and the snow began to melt. Evelyn had never lived through spring like this before. In the city, it was noisy, filled with horns and schedules and rushing people. But here it was soft. The land woke slowly, stretching under sunlight, blooming with tiny green signs of life. Cale built the new cabin near the stream, just like he said he would. Evelyn helped, carrying stones and smoothing mud for the walls. It was hard work, but it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like progress. Each night, they watched the stars come out. Each morning, they woke to birdsong. She learned to trap rabbits, skin them, and cook stews that filled the belly and warmed the soul. He taught her how to read tracks, how to tell which animals had passed by and when. In return, she painted. She covered the inside walls of the cabin with simple pictures, flowers, birds, memories of their journey. Cale said it made the place feel like her. Bright, full of light. One morning, she found Cale fixing the fence outside. His shirt was off, and his back was to her. She watched him, smiling. You look happy, he said without turning around. I am, she replied. You miss anything? Evelyn walked to him, wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. Not a thing, not even the noise, not even the pain. He turned, kissed her forehead. Good, because I'm not letting you go. She smiled. You never have to. Years later, the world outside went on. Wars were fought. Cities changed. People rushed through time. But deep in the wild, far from roads and maps, Evelyn and Cale lived a quiet life. They didn't have much, but they had everything that mattered. One evening, as snow began to fall again, Evelyn sat by the fire with a small boy in her lap. His hair was dark like Cale's, his eyes green like hers. She told him stories of a girl who had once whispered into the wind, "Please take me away. I have no one," and of a giant Apache who had listened, who had answered with love. Outside, Cale chopped wood with steady hands. The snow gathered in his hair, and he smiled as he worked. Evelyn watched him through the window, heart full. She had once feared winter, feared the unknown, feared being alone. Now, she welcomed the snow, because it was here, among the trees, the silence, the storm, that she had found everything. Not just safety, not just peace, but love. True, wild, beautiful love. And she would never be alone again.